Well, there you go. I have been in this country for 23 years. And only in the last 3 years I started to get engaged in football and basketball, not because my interests have changed, but I figured that my son is growing up and I'll have nothing in common if I don't start to learn. So thanks. Next time I'll use that example. Yes. One thing I will also talk about is that a lot of times, and again, let's talk about the support services or product example, right? As an engineering organization, we might have published best practices. We may have given guardrails, and you realize that the services organization may not have followed that. And as a result, the customer is in a very, very unhappy state. Now the issue is coming back, services raises their hand, and we have to get involved. Now, they need help to put out the fire. Now, the human instinct is, you screwed up, you fix it. And I think it's something that I can absolutely understand. But that's the wrong thing to do at that point. I'm not saying you don't hold people accountable and you be nice all the time, but I would like to ask you to change the sequence of the conversation. When somebody is asking you for help and the house is on fire, that's not the time to play the blame game. That's the time to say, okay, I will put my issues aside, let me help you get out of this mess. But in order to avoid this in future, the second thing that you do once you're out of the fire, you have earned yourself a lot of tokens with that person or that organization. They're willing to listen to you, because if you did the second thing, which is basically saying, let me understand why we got ourselves in this situation. If that was the first thing you discussed, it would come across as you're trying to avoid work and you're trying to play the blame game. But if you just, and eventually the funny thing is, because the customer is on fire, you'll have to help them anyway. No matter how much of a diva you become, you have to come back and help them. So might as well be the hero, go help them, and then say, I want you to come back for a retrospect. I want to understand why this happened. At that time, you've already established yourself as somebody who is looking out for the product, for the customer. You have established your credibility and your willingness to help. People are going to come there to listen. And at the retrospect time, you can be as direct and as crude as you want to be, and make it such that they don't want to come to a retrospect another time, right? But again, do it in that sequence, and all of a sudden, you'll start to see that all your efforts are starting to pay off. If you are the person who just complained and not do something to be better next time, then you'll repeat that cycle over and over again. Again, some books for you to take a look. I know this predates me, so I'm sure you guys have, a lot of you have seen this speech from JFK. In 1961, JFK gave one of those remarkable speeches where it urged the nation to kind of support this objective of sending a person to the moon and bringing him or her back safely. It was if not impossible, it was an improbable goal, but he said that. The reason I'm saying that is that from that point onward started being referred to as the moonshot. Google has, I think, teams that does moonshots and stuff like that. In the book Good to Great, or it was a Built to Last, I forgot, but there was a concept of BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goals. So there are many names for it, but I just want to define the word moonshot. Maybe it was not necessary, but let me just make sure that we're on the same page. So the point is, as leaders, you often are setting incremental goals, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you really want to take your team to the next level and inspire them and basically play at a different league, you need to set moonshots. And you need to be serious about those moonshots. You cannot say, I want to do this, and the next day you don't even follow up, right? You want to really put all of your energy in pursuing some of these moonshots, because incremental goals are okay, but they're not as inspiring. So as a leader of the organization, you need to figure out a goal that is challenging enough, seemingly impossible or seemingly improbable, but you know that you have some ideas that can get you there. you will see a different team emerge. Not even at the end of it, during that period. Okay? So I would encourage you to create moonshots for your team, at least a few or maybe a couple or one, to drive the team forward. The reason that many people don't do that is the fear of failure. But let me assure you why that is not, let me tell you why that is not a rational fear. If you really believe this is a moonshot that's worth taking, and you run those ideas by a few people and everybody says, yeah, this is good, you should do this, and you put in your best effort, three things can possibly happen. One, it is a spectacular success, you are a hero, your team is getting bonuses every day, all that is good. The second best thing that could happen is you don't exactly get where you shot for, but you get enough benefits where it was considered a partial success. The third scenario is it is a complete disaster, right? Even then, I don't know of any leader or any company or any product that would fault you for putting in your best effort and failing. If people do that, maybe that's your clue to get out of that company or get out of that product or get out of that team, right? So there is no good reason not to shoot for a moonshot and kind of challenge the status quo. Anybody who is kind of happy with status quo should not be in leadership. You're there to transform things. You're trying to move the needle forward. And one way to do that is to create moonshots. Okay, I'm going to move on.
Can you go back to the book?
Yes. I have a cheat sheet that I need to look at now.
I think a good example of not sharing failure is the long bus. How many times the rockets blow up?
That's right. Okay.
Technically, they didn't blow up, they just fell over. No, that's because of blow. They fell over.
Okay. Daniel Pink, I already referred to one of the books from him, which is The Drive. If you have not read the book Drive, you should. It's a wonderful book. If you're not in the habit of reading a book, then there's a 19-minute YouTube video that you should watch. I think you'll get a lot out of it. It's called Drive, Daniel Pink. But he wrote another book, To Sell is to Human. To Sell is to Human, yeah. So basically, there he argues that 40% of your time, no matter which job you are in, or in fact, even if you're not in a job, maybe even at home, you are spending 40% of your calories selling. What he means by that is, it's not about actually taking out a product and selling. It's selling an idea, selling a plan, selling anything, right? So we, as a leader, we need to get better at selling, because as a leader, you'll realize that you are much more exposed to the success and failure of selling, because you don't only represent, and this one probably is meant more for people that manage people, but a lot of times your ability to sell impacts how your team is perceived. So it's extremely important, and some people undervalue this, saying that my work will speak for itself, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I do think that a little bit of marketing, a little bit of selling is important. And obviously you have to back it up by good work and substantial work. That's obviously a given. But my point is that you need to value the art of selling, and you need to kind of acquire it. For some people it comes naturally. For some people they have to acquire that skill, but you must. And let me give you a little bit... okay, sure, okay. I have to kiss the mic, I think that's, yeah. When you're selling, I'm going to give you a couple of tips that I have learned along the way. Whenever you're selling an idea, they should really fall into three buckets, although people can argue that there are other buckets as well. Either you tie that idea that you're trying to sell. Maybe you're trying to fund a project. Maybe you're trying to hire somebody. Maybe you're trying to fire somebody, whatever, right? It can fall into three buckets. And if you have that clarity in your mind that says, I'm going to try to sell it as this, then you can start to find supporting arguments for that. And what are those 3 buckets? One, it's going to impact my top line. So it's going to either bring in more revenue, it'll have more profit, whatever. The second thing is, maybe it's not going to bring more dollars into the company, but I might actually save some dollars. So any idea or any project that you're trying to sell to your boss or a group of people, maybe you can pitch it as a cost-saving measures. Now, not all of them fall into either revenue or cost savings. There are many things that we do that is something that doesn't fall into those 2, but it falls into I can eliminate risk or I can minimize risks. And you'll find, and at least in my experience, I've found that whatever I'm trying to sell, they can typically be categorized in these 3. Okay, so just keep that at the back of your mind that that's how you can sell an idea. And when you're selling to an executive, especially higher up you go, another thing to keep in mind is the sequence of how you approach it. And I'm sure this is probably common sense for a lot of you, but it wasn't for me. I had to go to a class to figure this one. For me, whenever I pitched an idea to higher ups, it was always about building it up and then punchline at the end, right? That's not how executives. And as I grow in my career, I also realized that I don't have the time to listen to the whole argument. I want to kind of know what your pitch is, and then if I'm interested, I'll dig deeper, and then you can go as much details as you need to. But for me, to hear the punchline first is kind of important. So I can only imagine if I'm presenting to CEO or whoever that is, it's important for them to really see what are you after. Tell me that punchline right away, and then make your case, which is very counterintuitive if you didn't already know this, right? Just wanted to get that to you. And this is the book that I was talking about, that To Sell is Human. And by the way, I'm in engineering, I'm not in sales. But for whatever reason, I picked up this book, Spin Selling, and I actually read it. It's hugely interesting. I think every engineer or every engineering leader should read this. It will help you personally as well, I think. Okay. How many of you over here, and I'm serious about this question, how many of you think whining is attractive? Or complaining is appealing? None of you raised your hands, and I agree with that. I don't think it is. But you'll see, for one reason or the another, you'll find in your team or your peers, there are people that are negative in nature, and they're always finding something that is not right about something. And I feel like this is like scratching. If you have a scratch, you scratch it, you want to scratch even more, right? So complaining is kind of like scratching in my mind. It doesn't really go away because you complained. It actually makes it more. And then, one of the favorite things is to talk bad about your manager and like, oh, you felt that way too? And then all of a sudden, at the end of that discussion, I now have the grievances of what you have also. Not only that I have my own grievances, like, I can't believe he did that to you, and then now that adds on to my grievances as well. So it's just not a healthy thing to do. So as a leader, you want to distinguish between genuine venting that sometimes human beings need to do, to somebody who is habitual in complaining. And that creates such a negative energy in the environment that you need to kind of establish a whine quota and say, okay, that's enough, we have talked about it. And let me give you some examples around this that are very, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the examples maybe can be about the children, so you have the oldest boy and the half-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah, so one example of whining and needing a quota, I guess, is to, how children behave. They like to complain about most everything. Is that kind of the idea? No?
So you came to this country 20 years ago or so. Why did among children so widespread when people are growing up in your country, complaining when you are, having your son?
I'm so sorry, but I don't think I totally got that.
He said he was saying how basically when you grew up, the whining quota was much smaller
I see.
than it is now.
Fair enough, fair enough. So, yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I live that every day, so I understand it. Sorry?
Same with the Cavaliers.
See, now I understand. Now I understand that joke. 3 years earlier, I wouldn't have understood that joke. I'm getting better. Okay, go
So
ahead.
I have to say I kind of disagree with this slide because I agree that the white quota you may be limited, but you should listen or like give people a chance to explain why things is wrong.
Fair
I
enough. So,
know, especially in case I used to be in the past when I was testing things, when the CEO told me to not tell about all the bugs because like that this puts the morale down of the salespeople and other things, just like ignore bugs. And
Oh,
that's
I mean-
exactly that direction I go with Rachel.
no, that's fair. I'm going to give you a couple of examples to talk about what kind of complaining I'm talking about. So I'll give my personal example. All right. I'm getting emotional here.
We've got two mics on tonight, one for here, one for the recording.
All right, so example. So I talked about in my background, I was working at Taleo. It was a 1,400 people company, just the right size. It's not too big where you get lost, and it's not too small where you have to do everything for yourself, kind of a thing.